Thanks for joining me on episode 392 of the Inspired Stewardship Podcast.
I'm Joel Hallbaker, teacher, speaker, and author of Inverted Leadership. I challenge you to invest in yourself, invest in others, develop your influence, and impact the world by using your time, your talent, and your treasures to live out your calling. Having the ability to lead through confident humility is key, and one way to be inspired to do that is to listen to this, the Inspired Stewardship Podcast with my friend, Scott Mater.
I know for me that's been true. The more I've understood and gotten into serving others first, the easier it's been for me to pray, the easier it's been for me to listen, the easier it's been for me to connect in worship and in prayer with God. It's become the fact that I put the cause and effect backwards.
Welcome and thank you for joining us on the Inspired Stewardship Podcast. If you truly desire to become the person who God wants you to be, then you must learn to use your time, your talent, and your treasures for your true calling. In the Inspired Stewardship Podcast, you will learn to invest in yourself, invest in others, and develop your influence so that you can impact the world.
In today's Spiritual Foundation episode about impacting the world, I talk with you about why the prayer on earth as it is in heaven may not be exactly what you believe, why this prayer is one that we need to not just say but live, and what this looks like in your daily life. Now, what's called the Lord's Prayer, or the prayer that's in the Bible as being taught by Jesus, is probably something that most Christians are familiar with, and I would say even a lot of folks that maybe aren't Christians have heard it. And within that, there's this phrase, on earth as it is in heaven. It's right there in the middle of the prayer, and it really is something that I've had to think a lot about over the years. You know, for a long time, I thought it was sort of this phrase that meant that our job was to go out and make everything on earth just like it was in heaven. And in some levels, that's actually probably what it's asking for us to do. But maybe not completely. Because when you think about it, I mean, if heaven is this perfect place where we bask in the light of God and we connect with God fully and completely, there are probably things that we do here on earth that in heaven we would not have to do. There are things like evangelizing and spreading the gospel that wouldn't be necessary in heaven because everyone already connects to God fully and completely. So maybe it's not just asking for us to go out and do things here on earth like they're done in heaven. Instead, it's asking for us to do that one step of submitting ourselves to God fully and completely so that we can do the things here on earth that are oh so hard to do. The things like loving our neighbors, the things like truly caring for others' needs before we even think about our own, the things like being able to sacrifice and give to others in a way that doesn't just worry about what's in it for us, but actually worries about taking care of everyone else. The way where we take care of the poor and the indigent, the weak, and don't just bow to the strong. You know, the prayer, let it be on earth as it is in heaven, is really a command of submission to the will of God. And this prayer is one that we need to not just say, but actually live out. We need to seek out ways to get that submissive feeling, to actually bow down and give up our own will for the will of God. Now, you've heard me before on this podcast talk about seeking out your calling. I've talked about going out and doing things. I've talked about building a business or growing something that is what you are called to do so that you can help and serve others. And maybe maybe this idea of submitting yourself to the will of God sounds contrary to that. But the truth is that if you are living out your service to your neighbor, if you are living out loving others, then you're probably going to find yourself more connected to God. I think sometimes we put it backwards. We think when we love God enough, then I'll go out and do all these other things like take care of my neighbor. But I often think sometimes the act of taking care of your neighbor is what allows you to find your connection to God. I know for me that's been true. The more I've understood and gotten into serving others first, the easier it's been for me to pray, the easier it's been for me to listen, the easier it's been for me to connect in worship and in prayer with God. It's become the fact that I put the cause and effect backwards. And I think that's sort of what this command is. I think sometimes when we hear this idea of on earth as it is in heaven, we put heaven first. We think that we need to get to heaven before this is going to happen. But the truth is, this is about what we do here on earth. This is about what it looks like in your daily life. Not just what it looks like on Sunday, but what it looks like Monday through Saturday as well. What does it look like in your daily life to impact the world? What does it look like in your daily life to build your influence? What does it look like in your daily life to invest in others? What does it look like in your daily life to invest in yourself? See, in my mind, that framework of invest in yourself, invest in others, develop your influence, and impact the world is a natural progression that allows us to connect to our calling and through our calling to connect to God. And this prayer at a fundamental level, to me, is describing that same journey. At least for me, it was. So I ask you, in what way are you going to act this week to not just wait for heaven, but to actually begin to live out on earth as it is in heaven? Thank you for listening.
Thanks so much for listening to the Inspired Stewardship podcast. As a subscriber and listener, we challenge you to not just sit back and passively listen, but act on what you've heard and find a way to live your calling. If you enjoyed this episode, do me a favor. Go over to facebook.com/inspired stewardship and like our Facebook page and mark it that you'd like to get notifications from us so that we can connect with you on Facebook and make sure that we're serving you to the best of our abilities with time and tips there. Until next time, invest your time, your talent, and your treasures. Develop your influence and impact the world.